Hi guys. So I just finished. Ruth was having some technical difficulties, so I just got done with our multi-week, basically multi-month. We've been doing it since almost the beginning of the year, slowly going through the buyer's process. So we talked about again, in Illinois we do it a little differently. It's several weeks of due diligence and getting things figured out and getting title insurance figured out and lending and all that stuff. And then we close. We do the closing at the same time as the funding. So all the documents for the lender, all of the title insurance and stuff are all signed at the same time. And after all of that is done and lending has been funded, it is officially the house for the buyers. So we talked, I did forget to tell them. So hereabouts about an hour and a half to 2 hours of going through all that. I just finished renewing my accredited buyer's representative designation with NAR this week. I did it several years ago. I want to say about 8 or 9 years ago. So when I was fairly, early in the process of being an agent, I think I was about 1 year to 2 years into the business at that point. Things just hit home differently now. So I'm very happy I redid it. And I took it with the magnificent Lynn Madison, who is just my spirit animal. I want to be her when I grow up. She's great. So take anything. If you're Chicagoland area, well, you are lucky to be able to occasionally have a class with her in person. This one was an online one and a nationwide one through NAR. But so with this being our last step, talking about the final walkthrough and what to expect at the closing table, there were some gems that she shared that I put into our live today. So obviously, so we have a ton of paperwork. She really hit home that people can get this information ahead of time, that closing is not supposed to be the time. And she actually used her own personal husband, even though she had been in the business. He wanted to go through that contract or the closing documentation with a fine-tooth comb. And that's not the time to go through it. Do our buyers have the opportunity or should have the wherewithal to know what's in that document? All those documents they're signing? Absolutely. But here we use attorneys. So attorney goes page by page, document by document to kind of give an overview of what each document is. So luckily it's kind of off of our plate here and we have very little liability about that as agents, not knowing exactly what those legal documents are. But so we talked to them about needing a government issued ID to make sure that the lending and the paperwork and who's getting title is all kind of correct. And, the person saying they are who they are is that person. Insurance, homeowners insurance is very, very important to have that already in place and documents proving that day or previously that it is in place, because if not, the lender, if they're getting lending, will require it, and it will not be cheap. It will be probably 2 to 3 times the amount of money and cost a homeowner to do it on their own with their own personal policies and the adding cards and all that other stuff. It is much easier then to do it cheaper. And you don't want it. I mean, that's just extra paperwork to go, okay, no, after the fact and trying to get refunds and all that other stuff. They will not give you, they want their assets protected, which makes sense. They don't want that liability out there without having some sort of protection. And then the last thing I really tried to hit home was wire fraud. We've been told by everybody to make sure that we have wire fraud disclaimers on our signatures. I have one. I know Ruth has one. It's talking about, do not wire anything that comes from my email unless you've confirmed, and so we said, don't, you'll start getting emails. Maybe you've always got emails, but you've ignored them because they're obviously spam. But now that you're 2 days away from getting ready to close on a house, suddenly it's relevant. And so you think it's real. So we definitely want to hit home that it is very risky and you're not going to see that the buyers will not see that money ever again if it is wired somewhere incorrectly by a scammer. So, we want to make sure our buyers know to call us, to call the attorneys, to call and not take any direction from an email if they, without confirming with at least one or two other points of contact within the transaction to make sure that we are protecting their information best we can. So, but yeah, so, this is the easiest step, nicest step, greatest step. We encourage anybody to, do these final walkthroughs as close to the closing table, as possible, at least in our area. Final walkthroughs are done close to it. Sometimes people do it the night before. Sometimes people do it several days before. We've heard, as always, we're trying to keep our pulse on everything going on in real estate and know the good and the bad. And so these type of things, we hear horror stories. We soak up in those horror stories to hopefully never have it be part of our transaction. We've heard of new construction and other. I've heard of new construction having appliances stolen. I've heard of houses that were flips. The whole time the house was on the market, it was empty. And somebody took that opportunity to come in and get all of the appliances and knew that pretty much nobody would notice for a long time. And, nobody would be able to pinpoint it because somebody wasn't there all the time. But people have gone through the final walkthrough and found out it was gone. We contest that the longer it takes, the longer the time in between, the more chances of having a problem. Going in on a Friday or going in on at 5 o'clock the night before, maybe it's a Thursday night, and your closing's at 11 o'clock on Friday morning. Things can happen. A storm can happen. What happens if the roof is leaking? What happens if the basement got flooded? We've had, I believe, Ruth, had a situation where there was an air conditioning. We had central air here, and there was the air conditioning was stolen, but she only noticed that from the walkthrough outside because being in Chicagoland, we don't use our air conditioning units all the time. So it's not like, Arizona or something where it's a 90 on a good day, and you notice the moment you walk in. The furnace was probably on because that's the majority of our time is having furnaces on. So you don't notice right away that the air conditioning unit is not there because it's not on. There was no reason for it. So that's our opportunity to, as quickly and closely to the closing table we get, to have that last thing. Double check that anything that was talked about, repairs and things like that were part of the contract or after contract negotiations, have been done. Things are where there need to be, it can be stupid things or not stupid things, but less important things or less noticeable things, like a swing set in the backyard that people went, oh, we changed our mind. Or I know this sounds ridiculous, but I remember it might have been in Lynn's class, to be honest, that there was talking about somebody closed on a house in October. So they've owned the house since October, and now it is March, April, February, somewhere around there. And there is somebody, the previous owner is in their front yard digging out the bulbs for their annuals that they want, that they forgot to take. And now it just occurred to them. And now they're sitting there. So that's literally on our contract. One of the check marks there in the property, or, fixtures and property that is supposed to be left over, is landscaping as is, because people try this type of stuff, which is, I think, why Lynn said it was added, was because of things like that, and then people suing each other. So we want to try to make sure, to the best of our contracts, that final walkthrough is reflective of what was expected. Garage fridges are so popular around here. Bars, things like that in the basement. Just making sure everything is on the up and up, and protecting our buyers so that we're not trying to get it in the end, that there's no damage done. Intentional or not, sometimes people put a gigantic hole or, slamming a door open. those are the type of little things where it's like, yes, this is disappointing, but do you want to live in your house today, or would you like to renegotiate and get potentially risk the paperwork needing to be redone, and things like that if it's too much. And so, yeah, you have to understand wear and tear is going to be there, to an extent. Maybe as agents, that's where we go, you know what, I'll send a handyman in. In the next week, and he'll fix that hole that you weren't expecting to be there. So we want to make sure we manage their expectations too, that everybody's not sitting at the closing table for several hours while a couple pieces of documentation gets changed up for $30 worth of work. So anyway, that was our whole series on the buyers, and I think we might do sellers soon. I'm not sure. I think it's worth it. I liked it. It was very good to kind of slowly try to identify all the things that we help the clients for and everything that they need to know. So hopefully you've been tuning in, and hopefully you continue to tune in, and let us know if you have, I'd like to know other things that you do for your walkthroughs or situations you've had when you're getting close to the closing table, and things for us to be worried about, aware of, because we're always trying to learn as well. And we love to hear other realtors' experiences, good and bad. So until we see you, I think next week, have a great one. Bye-bye.